Imagine this. It's pouring rain, the kind that soaks you to the bone in seconds, and you're stuck under a flickering bus stop shelter in downtown Seattle, watching cars splash by like they're trying to make your night worse. That's exactly where Sophia Harrington was that evening. Sophia Harrington, the billionaire founder of a massive AI company, worth more than most people can even dream of. But right then, she was just a frustrated woman in a drenched cashmere coat, her Louboutins ruined, muttering about how her private car service flaked last minute and she thought taking the bus would be authentic. She had no idea that this storm was about to uncover something she'd been searching for her whole life. What if the person who changes everything for you shows up looking like the last guy you'd ever expect? Hang on, because this story is about to pull at every heartstring you've got. Before we get deeper, drop a comment right now. Where are you watching from and how old are you? I'm dying to know if you've ever met someone in a random moment who seemed too good to be true. Would you trust them if they were hiding something big? That's the fire in this one, and I promise, by the end, you'll be rethinking what real love actually looks like. So there, Sophia stood, rain drumming on the metal roof above her, checking emails on her phone about a 9-figure deal she'd just closed. At 41, she had everything: private jets, penthouses, magazine covers. But when it came to love, she'd been burned too many times. Guys either wanted her money or couldn't handle her power. After her last relationship ended with a guy who proposed only after seeing her Forbes ranking, she'd shut the door on dating completely. Tonight, she just wanted to get home dry. Then he showed up. A gentleman in his late 60s, salt and pepper hair tucked under an old rain hat, carrying a big golf umbrella that had definitely seen better decades. His name was Walter Brooks, Walt, as everyone called him. He wasn't dressed to impress, worn corduroy jacket, sensible boots, the kind of guy who blended into the background of the city. But his eyes lit up with this quiet kindness that made the cold feel a little less biting. "Young lady, you're getting hammered out there," he said with a soft southern drawl that didn't quite match the Pacific Northwest. He tilted the umbrella her way without waiting for permission. Sophia paused. In her world, nothing came free, but the rain was merciless, and something about his easy smile felt safe. She stepped closer, thanking him quietly, and suddenly they were sharing this little bubble of dryness while the rest of the world blurred around them. The bus was late, shocker, and so they started chatting. Light stuff at first. How long the rain's been non-stop, the way the city's skyline keeps changing. Walt told her he'd retired from teaching high school English in a small town outside Portland years ago, now spending his time reading to kids at the library and fixing up old boats down at the marina. "Keeps my mind sharp and my heart full," he said, chuckling as he adjusted his glasses. Sophia didn't mention her empire. Instead, she said she worked in software. For once, she wanted to be just Sophia, not the billionaire shark. And Walt? He didn't push. He just listened like every word mattered. As the minutes dragged on, the talk turned real. He spoke about his wife, Clara, who'd passed 8 years earlier from a long illness. His voice softened as he described their little house on the water. Sunday mornings making pancakes, slow dances in the living room to Otis Redding. "She knew every flaw I had and loved me anyway," he said, staring out at the rain. Sophia felt something twist inside her chest. Her life was boardrooms and breakthroughs, but empty of that kind of steady, everyday love. If this were you, standing there getting to know a stranger who feels like an old friend, would you let your guard down? Or would you assume there's always an angle? Finally, the bus hissed to a stop, spraying them both. They climbed on together, ending up side by side on the foggy windows. Walt insisted on seeing her safely to her door when they got off near her neighborhood. "Can't have you wrestling puddles alone," he grinned. Sophia actually laughed. Something rare these days. She gave him the address of her low-key condo she kept for nights like this, not the glass mansion on the hill. At the door, he tipped his hat. If the rain catches you again, I'll be at this stop most Thursdays, headed to my veterans coffee group. She watched him walk away, umbrella swaying, and felt a warmth she hadn't in years. But doubt whispered too. Was he really that pure, or was this too perfect? Weeks passed, and Sophia started finding reasons to take that bus route on Thursdays. Walt always had a hot coffee waiting, black, 2 sugars, just how she let slip she liked it. They talked about everything, favorite books, biggest regrets, the dreams you give up on when life gets hard. He told stories about students he'd pushed to chase college when no one else believed in them. Sophia shared her fears of ending up alone, careful not to reveal too much. "Sometimes I feel like people only see the mask," she admitted one evening as thunder rumbled. Walt looked at her gently, his hand brushing hers. "The real you shows up when the rain strips everything else away," he said. Their connection grew deeper, stronger, impossible to ignore. She loved his calm wisdom, the way he made the world feel smaller and kinder. One drizzly afternoon, after months of these meetings, Walt handed her a handful of daisies he'd picked near the marina. "Sophia, you've brought color back to my days," he said, voice catching. "Would you let me cook you dinner? Nothing special, just spaghetti and whatever's in my fridge." Her pulse raced. Falling for a man 25 years older? The tabloids would feast. Her investors would raise eyebrows. But under that umbrella, she said yes. Dinner at his modest bungalow was perfect. Books everywhere, photos of Clara smiling on the walls, sauce simmering while they laughed over his slightly charred garlic bread. They danced slow to old soul music, her head against his chest, feeling truly held. As the months rolled on, Sophia wrestled with her biggest secret, her wealth. Should she tell him? Walt seemed happiest with simple things. Sunset walks along the Sound, sharing stories on a park bench. But then, little hints surfaced. One night, he quietly mentioned lingering hospital bills from Clara's care. Nothing devastating, but enough to tighten his budget in retirement. Sophia's stomach knotted. Was he dropping a line, or just opening up? She buried the worry, choosing to believe in the man who'd never asked for anything. Then, 7 months in, back at their original bus stop, under a gentle rain, Walt got down on one knee, slowly, smiling through the stiffness, and pulled out a small vintage ring that had been his mother's. "Sophia, you've reminded me that love doesn't care about years or circumstances. It just cares about truth. Will you marry me?" Tears streamed down her face as she said yes, the rain mixing with pure joy. They held each other like the world had stopped. But later that night, alone in her real home, the one with the panoramic views she still hadn't shown him, her head of security placed a thick folder on her desk. "You asked for a full check on Walter Brooks. There's history here you need to know." Heart pounding, Sophia opened it. Pages of old records, debts that didn't add up, and a buried family trust worth millions that Walt had walked away from decades ago. Questions exploded in her mind. Why had he hidden this? Was everything about to crumble, or was this the moment his true side finally came into the light? Sophia sat frozen at her glass desk, the city lights twinkling below like they were mocking her. The folder lay open, pages spilling out details she'd never expected. Walter Brooks, her Walt, had been born into one of the oldest lumber fortunes in the Northwest. His family owned thousands of acres, mills that had built half the houses in the state a century ago. But 35 years earlier, right after college, he'd signed away his inheritance, walked out on everything, and never looked back. The trust was still there, gathering dust and interest, worth tens of millions now. And those hospital bills? Paid off quietly years ago by a family lawyer who'd never stopped trying to pull him back in. So why live like he was scraping by? Why the modest bungalow, the thrift store coats, the stories about tightening his belt? Her mind raced through every moment they'd shared. The way he'd never asked about her work beyond polite questions. How he'd light up talking about books or the kids at the library, but brush off anything about money with a quiet laugh. Was it all an act? Some long game to seem humble? Or had he really turned his back on wealth because it poisoned everything he loved? She felt sick, excited, terrified all at once. If you were her, staring at proof that the man you just said yes to had hidden a life bigger than most people's dreams, what would you do? Confront him and risk shattering it all, or wait and see if he'd ever trust you enough to tell the truth himself? The next morning, the rain had stopped, but Seattle felt heavier than ever. Sophia called Walt, her voice steadier than her heart. "Can we meet at our spot? I need to see you." He sounded happy, oblivious. "Of course, darling. I'll bring coffee." She got there early, pacing under the dry shelter, rehearsing words that kept tangling in her throat. When he showed up, umbrella folded away for once, smiling that same warm smile, she almost lost her nerve. They sat on the bench, steam rising from the cups. Small talk felt impossible, so she just handed him the folder. No words at first. Walt's face changed slowly, surprise, then something like resignation. He flipped through the pages quietly, fingers tracing old signatures, his own from decades ago. When he finally looked up, his eyes were glassy but steady. "I figured one day this might catch up to me," he said softly. "I just hoped it wouldn't be like this." Sophia swallowed hard. "Why didn't you tell me, Walt? You let me think you were struggling. The bills, the simple life. Were you testing me? Seeing if I'd stick around without knowing there was money?" He shook his head, setting the folder aside like it burned him. "No, Sophia. Never testing you. Hiding from myself, maybe. That money. It destroyed my family. My father worked himself into the grave chasing more. My mother drank to forget the loneliness. My brother, well, he overdosed, trying to feel something real in a world where everything was bought. When Clara got sick, I saw what mattered. Not boardrooms or bank accounts, just holding her hand, reading to her, making her laugh on the bad days. After she was gone, I didn't want any part of what killed the people I loved. So I walked away. For good." She searched his face for lies and found only raw honesty. "But you could have had comfort, security. Why live paycheck to paycheck when you didn't have to?" Walt reached for her hand, his grip warm and familiar. "Because comfort bought with that money always came with chains. I wanted to earn my peace the hard way, teaching kids who needed it, fixing boats with my own hands, choosing every day to be the man Clara believed in. Not the heir, not the name on some trust, just Walt." He paused, voice dropping. "And then you showed up, soaking wet and beautiful, and for the first time in years I wanted more than peace. I wanted a future, but I was scared if you knew the truth. You'd see the old version of me, the one who ran, and not the one sitting here now." Tears slipped down Sophia's cheeks. All those months she'd hidden her own billions, terrified he'd want her fortune. And here he was, hiding his past for the exact opposite reason, terrified she'd want him in spite of it, or because of it. She laughed through the tears, a shaky sound. "You know I haven't been honest either, right?" She told him everything. Her company, the penthouse, the life she'd built from nothing in a tiny apartment with ramen and code. How she'd downplayed it all because every man before him had seen dollar signs first. Walt listened, eyes widening, then softening. When she finished, he just pulled her close. "Looks like we both thought the rain washed away our real selves that night," he murmured into her hair. "But maybe it just showed us who we could be together." They sat there a long time. No rush, no secrets left. Sophia felt the weight lift, the fear that love always came with a price tag. Walt had chosen a harder path to stay true to himself, and in doing so, proved he was exactly the man she'd fallen for. Kind, steady, real. Age didn't matter. Money didn't matter. Only the choices they'd made when no one was watching. A few months later, on a clear spring evening, no rain this time, they got married in a small ceremony by the water. Just close friends. The librarian who'd introduced Walt to half the kids in town. A few of Sophia's team who'd finally met the man who made her smile like that. She wore a simple dress. He wore the same corduroy jacket she'd first seen him in. They wrote their own vows, promising to always choose truth, even when it was messy. To build a life that was theirs, not defined by what they'd escaped or what they'd earned. Sophia kept her company but started a foundation with Walt, funding scholarships for first-generation college kids, the kind he'd taught for decades. He never touched the old trust. Instead, they bought a little house near the marina, big enough for books and laughter and maybe, one day, grandkids' footsteps. They still took the bus sometimes just because, and every time it rained, they'd stand under that same old umbrella, smiling at the memory of how a storm brought them exactly what they'd both been missing. Real love, it turns out, isn't about finding someone perfect. It's about finding someone who chooses to show you their true side, flaws and fears and all, and still wants to stand in the rain with you anyway. If this story hit you in the feels, if it made you think about what really matters when it comes to love and trust, do me a huge favor. Hit that like button, drop a comment telling me your favorite part, or if you've ever had a rainy day moment that changed everything. Share this with someone who needs to hear that good men, real men, still exist. And if you haven't already, subscribe and turn on notifications, because I've got more stories like this coming. Ones that remind us hope shows up when we least expect it. Thank you for watching, for feeling this with me. I'll see you in the next one.